The blood on Zelda Foster's hands was not her own, and as she stood in the doorway of the general store in Salina, Kansas, watching a stranger dismount from his horse with the kind of easy grace that came from years in the saddle, she knew her life was about to change forever. It was August 1878, and the heat pressed down on the prairie town like a heavy hand. Zelda had been scrubbing the wooden counter inside the store for the better part of an hour, trying to work off the nervous energy that had plagued her since dawn. Her daughter, 3-year-old Emma, played quietly in the corner with a rag doll, her dark curls catching the afternoon light that streamed through the dusty windows. The stranger tying his horse to the hitching post outside wore a weathered duster coat despite the heat, and beneath his wide-brimmed hat, Zelda could make out strong features darkened by sun and wind. She quickly wiped her damp hands on her apron and moved away from the door, positioning herself behind the counter as the bell above the entrance chimed. The cowboy stepped inside, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and eyes the color of creek water after a spring rain. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with a deliberate caution that told Zelda he was a man who had seen trouble and learned from it. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in the quiet store. "Name's Samuel Lawson. I'm looking for work, and I heard in town that this establishment might need someone to manage freight and handle the heavier stock." Zelda studied him carefully, weighing her options. She had been running the store alone since her employer, old Mr. Henderson, had passed 3 months ago. He had left the business to her in his will, a kindness that had shocked the entire town and provided endless fodder for gossip. A woman running a business alone was unusual enough, but a widow with a child and a mysterious past made her the subject of constant speculation. "We might have some work," she said carefully. "The pay is not much, but it is steady. Room and board included if you are willing to sleep in the loft above the storage room." Samuel's gaze drifted to Emma, who had looked up from her doll to study the stranger with wide, curious eyes. His expression softened immediately, and he crouched down slowly, keeping his distance but offering the child a gentle smile. "Hello there, little miss," he said. "That is a fine doll you have got." Emma clutched her toy closer but did not look away. "Her name is Rosie," she said softly. "Rosie is a beautiful name," Samuel replied before standing and turning his attention back to Zelda. "I am a hard worker, madam. I can handle inventory, freight, repairs, and anything else you might need. I have spent the last 5 years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, but I am ready to settle down for a spell." There was something in his eyes, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion, that made Zelda believe him. She had seen that look in her own mirror often enough to recognize it in another person. "You can start tomorrow," she said, making her decision. 6 days a week, Sundays off. I will show you the loft and the storage room so you know what you are working with." Relief flickered across Samuel's face and he nodded. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mrs. Foster," she supplied. "Zelda Foster, and that is Emma." "Mrs. Foster," he repeated, settling his hat back on his head. "I will not disappoint you." As Zelda led him through the store to the back rooms, explaining the inventory system and the various suppliers they worked with, she was acutely aware of his presence behind her. He asked intelligent questions, made mental notes of everything she showed him, and treated both her and Emma with a respectful courtesy that was becoming increasingly rare in her experience. The loft above the storage room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window that overlooked the main street. Samuel surveyed it with obvious satisfaction. "This will do just fine," he said. "Better than most line camps I have slept in. There is a pump out back for washing. Zelda told him. "Meals are taken in the kitchen behind the store at 7 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. If you are working late, I will leave something for you." He turned to face her fully, and in the confined space of the loft, Zelda became suddenly aware of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the room. But there was nothing threatening about him. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of safety that confused her. "Thank you, Mrs. Foster," he said quietly. "I can see you are taking a chance on a stranger, and I want you to know I understand that." Zelda nodded and quickly descended the ladder back to the storage room, Emma already calling for her from the store front. As she hurried away, she could feel Samuel's gaze following her, thoughtful and assessing but not unkind. That evening, after she had closed the store and prepared a simple supper of beans, cornbread, and salt pork, Zelda sat with Emma in their small living quarters attached to the store. The rooms were modest but comfortable, furnished with pieces Mr. Henderson had given her over the years. Emma chattered about the cowboy with the kind eyes while Zelda brushed out her daughter's curls, only half listening. Her mind was occupied with the risk she had taken in hiring Samuel Lawson. She knew nothing about him beyond what he had told her, and in a town like Salina, where her reputation was already precarious, associating with a drifting cowboy could cause more problems. But she was also practical enough to know that she needed help. The store was too much for one person to manage, especially with a small child to care for, and the physical labor of moving freight and heavy supplies was beyond her capabilities. She thought about the way Samuel had looked at Emma, the genuine warmth in his expression. Some men looked at children with indifference or irritation, seeing them as nuisances to be tolerated. Samuel had looked at her daughter with the kind of gentle kindness that suggested he understood what it meant to be small and vulnerable in a harsh world. The next morning, Samuel arrived at the kitchen door precisely at 7, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt. Zelda had prepared flapjacks, eggs, and coffee, and she watched as he took his seat at the small table with an easy courtesy that suggested he was trying not to intrude on her space. "This smells wonderful," he said sincerely. "It has been a long time since I had a proper home-cooked breakfast." Emma climbed into her chair and immediately began telling Samuel about a dream she had about horses, her small hands gesturing animatedly. Samuel listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making encouraging noises that delighted the little girl. Zelda found herself relaxing slightly as she served the food, watching the interaction between her daughter and this stranger who did not feel quite so strange anymore. "Emma's father," Samuel said carefully as he accepted his plate, "is he?" "Dead," Zelda said quickly, the lie coming easily after years of practice. "He died before she was born. It was not entirely false. The man who had fathered Emma was dead to them, might as well be buried in the ground for all he mattered in their lives. But the truth was more complicated and far more dangerous, and Zelda had learned that simple lies were easier to maintain than complex truths." Samuel nodded, a shadow passing over his face that suggested he had his own painful history. "I am sorry for your loss," he said quietly. They ate in companionable silence, broken only by Emma's occasional observations about everything from the weather to her doll's supposed adventures. After breakfast, Samuel helped clear the table without being asked, then followed Zelda to the store to begin his first real day of work. The morning passed quickly. A freight wagon arrived with new supplies, and Zelda watched as Samuel efficiently unloaded the heavy barrels and crates, organizing them in the storage room with a systematic precision that impressed her. He was strong but not reckless, careful but not slow, and he worked with the kind of focused intensity that suggested he took pride in doing things well. Customers came and went throughout the day, and Zelda observed how Samuel interacted with them. He was polite but reserved with the men, respectful and proper with the women, and patient with the children who came in to gawk at the candy jars. The town's opinion of him, she knew, would be formed quickly, and so far he was making a good impression. It was late afternoon when trouble arrived in the form of Vernon Hayes and his two sons. The Hayes family owned a large ranch outside of town and wielded considerable influence in Salina. Vernon was a big man with a red face and a booming voice, and he had made his interest in Zelda uncomfortably clear ever since her employer's death. The fact that she had no interest in him, or in any man, seemed to only fuel his determination. "Zelda," Vernon said loudly as he entered the store, his sons flanking him like deputies. "I heard you hired yourself some help. Thought you might have come to me if you needed a man around the place." Zelda kept her expression neutral as she stood behind the counter. "I needed someone to manage freight and inventory, Mr. Hayes. Samuel Lawson came with good references and experience." Vernon's gaze shifted to Samuel, who had emerged from the storage room at the sound of voices. The two men assessed each other with the careful wariness of dogs meeting for the first time on disputed territory. "Lawson," Vernon said flatly. "Where you from?" "Texas originally," Samuel replied evenly. "Spent the last few years working cattle drives up the Kishom Trail." "That's so." Vernon stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "What made you decide to stop drifting and settle in Salina?" Samuel did not back down, but neither did he rise to the challenge in Vernon's voice. "Time to put down roots," he said simply. "Mrs. Foster offered me honest work and I took it." Vernon snorted and turned back to Zelda. "You know people are going to talk, having a strange man living on your property." "People talk regardless of what I do," Zelda said sharply. "I am running a business, Mr. Hayes, and I need help to do it properly. What people choose to gossip about is their concern, not mine." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut, but before Vernon could respond, Emma appeared from the back rooms, her doll clutched in her arms. She took one look at Vernon's red face and quickly moved to Samuel's side, pressing against his leg in a gesture of trust that surprised everyone, including Samuel himself. Samuel's hand came down gently on Emma's shoulder, a protective gesture that was neither aggressive nor possessive but spoke volumes about the kind of man he was. Vernon's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. "Come on, boys," he said abruptly. "We will do our business elsewhere." As the Hayes men left, the bell above the door chiming sharply, Zelda released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Samuel crouched down to Emma's level, his expression concerned. "You all right, little miss?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, hugging her doll tighter. "That man is loud," she said. "He is indeed," Samuel agreed, "but he is gone now." Zelda watched the interaction, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Emma was a shy child, cautious around strangers after their difficult past, and yet she had instinctively sought protection from Samuel as if she had known him for years rather than hours. "I am sorry about that," Zelda said as Samuel stood. "Vernon Hayes has been persistent in his attention since Mr. Henderson passed. He seems to think I need a man to take care of me and Emma." "Do you?" Samuel asked, his tone carefully neutral. Zelda met his eyes squarely. "No, I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my daughter. What I needed was someone to help with the physical labor of running this store, which is what I hired you to do." A small smile tugged at the corner of Samuel's mouth. "Understood, madam. Though I will say, having met Mr. Hayes, I can see why you might prefer to handle things on your own." Despite herself, Zelda felt her lips curve into a reluctant smile. "He is not the worst of them," she admitted, "but he is certainly the most insistent." As the days turned into weeks, a comfortable routine established itself. Samuel proved to be everything he had promised and more. He was reliable, hardworking, and possessed a quiet competence that made the store run more smoothly than it had in years. He repaired the sagging shelf in the corner that Zelda had been meaning to fix for months, reorganized the storage room to maximize space, and negotiated better prices with the freight company by virtue of his experience and calm professionalism. But it was his relationship with Emma that truly surprised Zelda. Samuel treated her daughter with a gentle patience that was remarkable. He carved her a small wooden horse during his evening hours, teaching her the names of different breeds and telling her stories about the cattle drives he had been on. He never spoke down to her or dismissed her questions, no matter how busy he was, and Emma bloomed under his attention like a flower finally receiving water after a drought. Zelda found herself watching them together during quiet moments in the store. Samuel would hoist Emma onto his shoulders to reach the high shelves, or let her help him sweep the floor with a small broom he had made for her. The little girl's laughter, which had been such a rare sound in their lives, became a regular occurrence, ringing through the store like bells. It was September when Zelda realized she was in trouble. Not the kind of trouble she had fled from in Missouri 3 years ago, but a different kind entirely. She was developing feelings for Samuel Lawson, feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his help with the store. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his voice when he sang quietly while working, the strength in his hands when he lifted heavy crates. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering about his past, curious about his thoughts. It terrified her. Zelda had sworn off men after Emma's father. She had promised herself that she would never again be vulnerable to that kind of pain and danger. Her daughter's safety and well-being were all that mattered, and anything that threatened that was unacceptable. But Samuel did not feel like a threat. Instead, he felt like safety itself, like a shelter in a storm she had been weathering alone for far too long. One evening, after the store had closed and Emma was asleep in her small bed, Zelda found herself in the kitchen preparing a late supper for Samuel, who had been working on inventory late into the night. She had just set the plate of food on the table when he appeared in the doorway, his sleeves rolled up and his hair slightly mussed. "You did not have to do this," he said, but his eyes showed his appreciation. "You have been working hard," Zelda replied, busying herself with pouring coffee to avoid meeting his gaze. "It is the least I can do." Samuel sat down and began to eat, and Zelda found herself lingering, wiping down counters that were already clean, rearranging items that did not need rearranging. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Mrs. Foster," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Zelda's hand stilled. "What is it?" "Why did you really leave Missouri?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Zelda slowly turned to face him, her heart pounding. "What makes you think I am from Missouri?" she asked carefully. "Your accent," Samuel said. "Little things you say, the way you pronounce certain words. I spent time in Missouri before the war, I recognize it." Zelda sat down slowly at the table, her hands folded in her lap. She had known this moment would come eventually. Samuel was too observant, too intelligent to accept her carefully constructed story indefinitely. "I am from Missouri," she admitted, "from a small town outside of Kansas City. And Emma's father." Samuel's voice was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. Zelda took a deep breath. The truth, or at least part of it, felt like stones in her mouth. "He was not my husband," she said quietly. "I was not married when Emma was born." Samuel did not flinch or show any sign of judgment. He simply waited, giving her space to continue or not as she chose. His name was Richard Foster, Zelda continued, the words coming easier now that she had started. He was a wealthy man from a prominent family. I worked in his household as a maid. He was charming at first, attentive. I was young and foolish enough to believe his promises. When I told him I was with child, he offered me money to disappear. When I refused, wanting him to do right by me and the baby, he became dangerous. Her hands were shaking now, and Samuel reached across the table, covering them with his own. The warmth and steadiness of his touch grounded her. He threatened to claim I had stolen from the household, Zelda said, her voice barely above a whisper. To have me arrested and sent to prison. He said he would make sure I never saw my child again, that she would be taken from me and given to an orphanage. I had no money, no family, no way to fight him. So I took the money he offered and I ran. I came to Kansas, found work with Mr. Henderson, and I have been here ever since. I took his last name so people would think I had been married to him, that Emma was legitimate. Samuel's grip on her hands tightened slightly. Does he know where you are? I do not think so, Zelda said. I was careful. I changed my first name slightly, used his surname instead of my own. As far as Richard Foster knows, I could be anywhere from California to New York. But you are still afraid he might find you. It was not a question, and Zelda did not deny it. Every day, she admitted. Every stranger who comes into the store, every letter that arrives, every unexpected knock on the door. I am always afraid it will be him, or someone he sent. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his thumbs rubbing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I want you to know something, Zelda, he said, using her first name for the first time. What you did, leaving to protect yourself and your daughter, that took courage. You built a life here, raised a beautiful child, earned the respect of this community. That man, whoever he is, he does not deserve a moment of your fear or your thoughts. Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes. I should have told you before, she said. You have a right to know what you might be getting involved with by working here. I am not going anywhere, Samuel said firmly. And if Richard Foster or anyone else ever shows up looking for you, they will have to go through me first. The intensity in his voice, the protective fire in his eyes, made Zelda's breath catch. This was more than an employee defending his employer. This was personal, and they both knew it. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that for us? Samuel's expression softened, and he turned her hands over in his, tracing the lines of her palms with his fingers. Because somewhere along the way, between moving freight and carving toys and eating breakfast at your table, I stopped seeing this as just a job. You and Emma, you have become important to me, more important than I probably have any right to say, given that I have only been here a few months. Zelda's heart was racing now, hope and fear warring in her chest. Samuel, I know you have reasons to be cautious, he continued. I know you have been hurt, and I know you are protecting your daughter. I'm not asking for anything from you, Zelda. I am just telling you that I care about you both, and if you ever need someone to stand with you, I am here. The tears spilled over then, and Zelda found herself unable to speak. Samuel stood and came around the table, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. She went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and letting herself cry for the first time in longer than she could remember. He held her steadily, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances that she did not have to be strong alone anymore. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed by her display of emotion, Samuel cupped her face in his hands and wiped away her tears with his thumbs. There is nothing wrong with crying, he said softly. You have been carrying a heavy burden for a long time. I have to think about Emma, Zelda said, her voice shaking. I cannot risk anything that might bring trouble to her. I understand, Samuel assured her, and I would never ask you to. But I want you to know that whatever happens, you do not have to face it alone anymore." That night, lying in her bed with Emma curled up beside her, Zelda replayed the conversation in her mind. Samuel's words, his touch, the look in his eyes, all of it pointed to feelings that matched her own. But was she brave enough to let him in? Was she willing to risk her heart again, and more importantly, was she willing to risk Emma's happiness and security? The autumn progressed, and the relationship between Zelda and Samuel deepened in quiet, subtle ways. He began joining them for supper every evening, and the three of them would sit together at the small kitchen table, talking about the day's events and making plans for the store. Samuel started teaching Emma her letters, using the store's inventory as teaching tools and making games out of counting and spelling. Zelda watched as her daughter's world expanded under his patient guidance, and she felt her resistance crumbling bit by bit. It was late October when Samuel finally kissed her. They had closed the store early to attend the town's harvest festival, and Emma had fallen asleep on Samuel's shoulders during the walk home. He had carried her inside and helped Zelda tuck her into bed, and when they stepped back out into the kitchen, the intimacy of the domestic scene overwhelmed them both. "Zelda," Samuel said, his voice low and rough, "I need you to tell me if I am reading this wrong. Because every day it gets harder to be near you and not." He did not finish the sentence. Instead, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Zelda's breath caught, and she found herself leaning into his touch. "You are not reading it wrong," she whispered. Samuel's eyes searched hers for a long moment, looking for any sign of doubt or fear. Finding none, he slowly lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Zelda did not pull away. Instead, she pressed closer, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as she kissed him back with all the longing and hope she had been suppressing for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you," he said simply. "I have been for weeks now, maybe longer. I love you and I love Emma, and I want to be part of your lives if you will have me." Zelda's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you too," she admitted. "I have been so afraid to say it, to even think it, but I do. I love you, Samuel." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Zelda felt the last of her walls crumbling. This was not like it had been with Richard. This was not promises made in secret and shame. This was real and good and right. When they finally pulled apart, Zelda took a deep breath. There was something she still needed to say, something she had been working up the courage to tell him. "Samuel, there is something you should know," she said. "About Emma's father, about why I am so afraid." Samuel took her hands in his. "You do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to share." "No, I want to," Zelda insisted. "I need you to understand what you are getting into if you truly want to be with us." She led him to sit at the table and then, in a quiet voice, she told him everything. She told him about Richard Foster's cruelty when she had refused his money, about the way he had hit her when she threatened to go to his family. She told him about the night she had packed everything she owned into a single bag and fled in the dark, terrified he would follow. She told him about the months of looking over her shoulder, jumping at every shadow, living in constant fear that he would find her and make good on his threats. "He is a dangerous man, Samuel," she finished. "He comes from a powerful family with money and influence. If he ever found Emma, I do not know what he would do. I need you to understand that being with me could put you in danger too." Samuel listened to everything without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had told him. Finally, he spoke. "I have a confession to make as well," he said. About my past, about why I stopped drifting and came to Selena. Zelda waited, her heart pounding, wondering what he would reveal. 5 years ago, I was engaged to be married, Samuel began. Her name was Catherine, and I loved her more than anything in the world, but her father did not approve of me. I was just a ranch hand with no prospects, and he wanted her to marry someone with money and position. When Catherine and I eloped, her father sent men after us. They caught up to us at a hotel in Abilene. His voice had gone flat, emotionless, and Zelda knew he was retreating into the memory to protect himself from the pain. They beat me nearly to death, Samuel continued. Left me in an alley to die. When I finally recovered enough to go looking for Catherine, I found out her father had sent her east to a sanitarium. He told everyone she had gone mad, that she had been having delusions. He locked her away to keep her from me, and when I tried to get her out, he had me arrested for trespassing and assault. I spent 6 months in jail. Samuel, Zelda breathed, horrified. When I got out, I went back to find her, he said. But the sanitarium said she had died 2 months earlier. Pneumonia, they claimed. I never got to see her body, never got to say goodbye. I have spent the last 4 years drifting from place to place, working cattle drives, trying to outrun the memories. I came to Selena because I was tired of running, tired of being alone. And then I found you and Emma, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I could have a future again. Zelda reached across the table and took his hands in hers. I am so sorry, she said. I cannot imagine what that must have been like. The reason I am telling you this, Samuel said, meeting her eyes, is because I understand what it is like to be at the mercy of powerful people who think they can control your life. I understand fear and loss, and the need to protect the people you love. And I am telling you right now, Zelda, that I will never let anyone hurt you or Emma the way Catherine was hurt. I will stand between you and anyone who tries, even if it costs me everything. Tears streamed down Zelda's face as she stood and moved around the table to sit in Samuel's lap, wrapping her arms around him. He held her tightly, and they stayed that way for a long time, 2 wounded souls finding comfort and strength in each other. So what do we do? Zelda finally asked. How do we move forward with all this hanging over us? Samuel pulled back to look at her, his expression determined. We live our lives, he said firmly. We refuse to let the past control our future. We love each other, we take care of Emma, we run the store, and we build something good and real. And if Richard Foster or anyone else ever shows up, we deal with it together. Together, Zelda repeated, liking the sound of that word. Samuel cupped her face in his hands. I want to marry you, Zelda. I want to be Emma's father in every way that matters. I want us to be a family. But I also understand if you need time, if you are not ready for that yet. Zelda's heart swelled with love for this man who had come into her life like an answered prayer. I want that too, she said. I want all of it. But you are right, we should take our time. Emma needs to adjust, and the town needs to see that this is real and not just a scandal waiting to happen, Samuel finished with a wry smile. I understand. We will do this properly. I will court you with flowers and walks and all the things a lady deserves. And when the time is right, when everyone including Emma is ready, we will get married. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness that Zelda had never thought possible. Samuel was true to his word, courting her with old-fashioned gentility that charmed the entire town. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, walked with her and Emma on Sunday afternoons, and treated her with a respect and tenderness that made the gossiping tongues of Selena fall silent. Even Vernon Hayes backed off, recognizing that Zelda had made her choice, and it was not him. Emma thrived under Samuel's attention. She began calling him Papa Sam, and Samuel embraced the role with a devotion that made Zelda's heart ache with love. He taught Emma to ride on a gentle mare he purchased with his savings, took her fishing in the creek, and tucked her in at night with stories about brave cowgirls and magical horses. The little girl who had been so quiet and cautious when they first arrived in Salina was now bright and confident, secure in the love of two parents who adored her. It was December when Samuel finally proposed officially. He had planned an elaborate surprise, taking Zelda and Emma on a sleigh ride through the snow-covered prairie under a sky full of stars. Emma, bundled in blankets and giggling with excitement, helped him present the ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that had belonged to his mother. "Zelda Foster," Samuel said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion as he knelt in the snow beside the sleigh. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Emma's father? Will you build a life with me, here in Salina, for all the days we are given?" "Yes," Zelda said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Emma cheered and threw her arms around both of them, and they stayed that way for a long moment, a family bound by love rather than blood but no less real for it. They were married on a cold January morning in 1879, in the small church at the center of Salina. The whole town turned out for the wedding, curious and supportive in equal measure. Zelda wore a simple blue dress that she had made herself, with wildflowers from the prairie woven into her hair. Samuel wore his best suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked down the aisle with Emma at her side. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with a tenderness that made several of the older ladies in the congregation dab at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Emma, serving as their witness, beamed with pride and importance. The reception was held at the general store, which they had decorated with lanterns and ribbons. The townspeople brought food and gifts, and there was dancing and laughter late into the evening. Vernon Hayes even showed up, offering his grudging congratulations and a generous gift of supplies for the store. "You have done well for yourself, Zelda," he admitted. "Lawson is a good man. I hope you will both be very happy." "Thank you, Vernon," Zelda said graciously, her hand tucked securely in Samuel's. "That means a great deal." As the celebration wound down and the guests began to depart, Samuel swept Emma up onto his shoulders and took Zelda's hand, leading them both up to their new home above the store. They had spent the last few weeks converting the loft into proper living quarters, with a bedroom for Samuel and Zelda, a smaller room for Emma, and a sitting area where they could spend evenings together as a family. After tucking Emma into bed, Samuel and Zelda finally found themselves alone in their own room. The nervousness that Zelda had been suppressing all day suddenly surfaced, and her hands shook as she began to unpin her hair. Samuel came up behind her, gently taking over the task. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said softly. "This day has been perfect and I am happy just to hold you." But Zelda turned to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I am ready," she said. "I trust you, Samuel. I love you." Their wedding night was everything that Zelda's first experience with intimacy had not been. Samuel was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs and fears, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. When they finally came together, it was with a love and trust that erased the painful memories of the past and replaced them with hope for the future. Afterward, lying in Samuel's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Zelda felt a peace she had never known before. This was what love was supposed to be, she thought. Not fear and secrets and shame, but safety and partnership and joy. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. Samuel's arms tightened around her. I love you too, Zelda Lawson. You and Emma both, my family. Your family, Zelda repeated, smiling as she drifted off to sleep. The first year of their marriage passed with the kind of quiet contentment that Zelda had only dreamed about. The store prospered under their joint management, with Samuel handling the heavy work and supplier negotiations, while Zelda managed the accounts and customer relations. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses. Emma flourished, growing taller and more confident every day. She started school in the fall, and Samuel would walk her there every morning before opening the store, listening to her chatter about her lessons and friends. In the evenings, he helped her with her homework while Zelda prepared supper, creating a domestic routine that felt natural and right. But there was still a shadow hanging over their happiness, and both Samuel and Zelda were aware of it even when they did not speak of it aloud. Richard Foster was still out there somewhere, and the possibility that he might someday discover where Zelda had gone was a fear that never completely disappeared. It was a warm afternoon in June when that fear became reality. Zelda was behind the counter helping a customer when the bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see a well-dressed man enter the store. He was tall and handsome in a cold way, with dark hair and calculating eyes that swept the room before settling on her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. Richard Foster had found her. For a moment, Zelda could not breathe. Her vision narrowed to tunnel vision, and she felt her knees weaken. The customer she had been helping said something, but the words did not register. All she could see was Richard, moving toward her with the confident stride of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. "Hello, Zelda," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Or should I say, Mrs. Lawson? It took me quite some time to track you down, but I always knew I would find you eventually." Before Zelda could respond, Samuel emerged from the storage room, a heavy crate in his arms. He took one look at Richard, then at Zelda's terrified expression, and immediately set the crate down with a deliberate care that belied the tension in his body. "Can I help you with something?" Samuel asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he moved to stand beside Zelda. Richard's eyes flicked to Samuel, dismissive and contemptuous. "You must be the new husband," he said. "I am Richard Foster, and I have come to retrieve what belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you," Samuel said flatly. "I suggest you leave before we have a problem." Richard laughed, a cold sound that made Zelda flinch. "The child belongs to me," he said. "Emma is my daughter and I have legal rights to her. I have come to take her back to Missouri where she belongs." "No," Zelda whispered, finding her voice. "You gave up any rights to her when you threatened to have me arrested and thrown in prison. You did not want her then, and you do not get to claim her now." "I was young and foolish," Richard said, his tone reasonable but his eyes hard. "I made mistakes, I admit that. But I am prepared to make things right now. I have a wife and a respectable home. Emma will want for nothing." "Except for the mother and father who actually love her," Samuel interjected. "You need to leave, now." Richard's expression darkened. "I have papers," he said. "Legal documents proving my paternity. The law is on my side. You can give her to me willingly, or I can return with the sheriff and take her by force. Either way, I am leaving Salina with my daughter." The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Zelda felt sick, her worst nightmare coming true. Richard had the resources and the ruthlessness to follow through on his threat, and she knew that fighting him in court would be expensive and likely futile. Rich men with lawyers usually got what they wanted, and she and Samuel were just small business owners in a prairie town. But Samuel did not back down. Instead, he stepped forward, positioning himself between Richard and Zelda. "You are not taking Emma anywhere," he said, his voice low and steady. She is my daughter in every way that matters. I have raised her, cared for her, loved her. You are nothing to her but a stranger making threats." Richard's hand moved to his jacket, and Samuel tensed, ready for violence. But before anything could happen, the door opened and Sheriff Tom Bradshaw entered, followed by several townspeople who had noticed the confrontation through the store windows. "Is there a problem here?" Sheriff Bradshaw asked, his hand resting casually on the butt of his pistol. Richard's expression smoothed into a pleasant mask. "No problem, Sheriff. I am simply here to claim my daughter. I have legal documentation proving that the child called Emma Foster is my biological daughter, and I have come to take her home." Sheriff Bradshaw looked at Zelda, then at Samuel, his weathered face troubled. "Is this true, Zelda? Is this man Emma's father?" Zelda swallowed hard. "Biologically, yes," she admitted, "but he abandoned us before she was born. He threatened me, tried to buy my silence, and made it clear he wanted nothing to do with his child. I ran to protect myself and Emma, and I have built a life here. Samuel is her father now, in every way that counts." "That may be," Richard interjected smoothly, "but the law does not care about sentiment. I have rights and I intend to exercise them." The sheriff looked troubled. "This is not something I can settle," he said finally. "If you have legal documents, Mr. Foster, then this will have to go before a judge. I can arrange for a hearing next week." "That is acceptable," Richard said. "In the meantime, I will be staying at the hotel in town, keeping an eye on my property." "Emma is not property," Samuel said through gritted teeth, "and if you go anywhere near her, you will regret it." "Is that a threat?" Richard asked, his eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "It is a promise," Samuel replied. Sheriff Bradshaw stepped between them. "That is enough, both of you. Mr. Foster, you will stay away from the child until the judge makes a ruling. Mr. Lawson, you will not take any action against Mr. Foster. We will handle this legally and properly." "Understood." Both men nodded, though neither took their eyes off the other. Richard smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. "I will see you in court, Mrs. Lawson," he said. "Or should I say, Miss Porter, since that is your real name, is it not? Yes, I did my research. You have been living under a false identity, raising my child in deception. That should make for an interesting discussion in front of a judge." He tipped his hat mockingly and left the store, leaving a tense silence in his wake. That evening, after closing the store early and sending Emma to stay with a neighbor, Samuel and Zelda sat at their kitchen table trying to figure out what to do. The papers Richard had shown the sheriff were real, proving his paternity, and the fact that Zelda had been using a false name and identity could work against them in court. "We need a lawyer," Samuel said. "A good one." "With what money?" Zelda asked despairingly. "We have some savings, but not nearly enough to fight a legal battle against someone like Richard. He has unlimited resources, Samuel. He can drag this out until we are bankrupt. Then we will find another way," Samuel insisted. "We are not giving up Emma without a fight." Over the next few days, word spread through Salina about the situation. To Zelda's surprise and profound gratitude, the townspeople rallied around them. Many of them had watched Emma grow from a quiet, frightened child into a bright, happy girl under Zelda and Samuel's care. They had seen the love and devotion that Samuel showed his adopted daughter, and they were not about to let some stranger from Missouri tear their family apart. Vernon Hayes, of all people, became one of their staunchest supporters. He hired a lawyer from Kansas City at his own expense, a sharp young man named Thomas Wright who specialized in family law. Thomas arrived in Salina 2 days before the hearing, and after reviewing the case, he gave them a realistic assessment. "The biological father has rights under the law," Thomas said bluntly. "But so do you, especially now that you are married to Emma's mother and have been acting as her father. What we need to prove is that taking Emma from her current home would be detrimental to her welfare, and that Mr. Foster's motivations are not in the child's best interest. How do we do that? Zelda asked. We show the judge what kind of man Foster really is, Thomas replied. We demonstrate that he abandoned you and his child, that he made threats, that he has only shown interest in Emma now that you have established a stable life. And we let Emma speak for herself. The hearing was held in the town hall, the only building large enough to accommodate the crowd of townspeople who showed up to support the Lawson family. Judge Robert Harrison presided, a stern older man known for his fairness and integrity. Richard Foster arrived with 2 lawyers from Kansas City, both dressed in expensive suits and carrying leather briefcases. They presented their case with cold efficiency, laying out the facts of Richard's paternity, his current respectable position as a bank manager in Kansas City, and his married status. My client deeply regrets his youthful mistakes, one of the lawyers said. But he is prepared to offer his daughter a life of privilege and opportunity that she cannot possibly have living above a general store in a small prairie town. He has a large home, resources for the finest education, and a stable family environment with his wife, who is eager to welcome Emma into their home. When it was their turn, Thomas Wright stood and began systematically dismantling Richard's case. He called witness after witness from Salina, people who testified to the loving home that Samuel and Zelda had created for Emma. Teachers who spoke about Emma's progress in school, neighbors who had watched her flourish, customers who had witnessed Samuel's patient devotion to his daughter. Then Thomas called Zelda to the stand, and with quiet dignity, she told her story. She described Richard's cruelty when she had refused to give up her baby, the threats he had made, the fear she had lived with for years. He did not want Emma when she was born, Zelda said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. He wanted to pay me to disappear, to pretend she did not exist. He threatened to have me arrested and to take my baby away if I did not comply. I ran because I was afraid, not just for myself but for my child. And now, after 3 years of silence, after Samuel and I have built a home and a family, now he decides he wants to play father. This is not about Emma's welfare. This is about control and pride. Richard's lawyers tried to discredit her testimony, pointing out that she had lived under a false name and questioning her moral character. But Judge Harrison cut them off sharply. Unless you have evidence that Mrs. Lawson has been anything other than a devoted mother and upstanding citizen of this community, I suggest you move on, he said sternly. Finally, Samuel took the stand, and his testimony was simple and heartfelt. He described meeting Emma for the first time, watching her grow and learn, becoming her father in every meaningful way. I love that little girl with everything I have, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. I tuck her into bed every night. I teach her to read and ride and be brave. I hold her when she has nightmares, and I celebrate with her when she succeeds. Emma calls me Papa, and I am honored by that title every single day. Mr. Foster may have contributed to her existence, but he has done nothing to earn the right to be her father. That right is earned through love and sacrifice and showing up every day, and I have done that. Emma is mine, and I am hers, and no judge or law can change what we have built together. There was not a dry eye in the courtroom when Samuel finished, and even Judge Harrison had to pause to compose himself before calling the final witness. Emma Foster Lawson, barely 4 years old, walked to the front of the courtroom with her mother holding her hand. Judge Harrison came down from his bench to kneel in front of her, speaking gently. "Hello, Emma," he said kindly. "Do you know why we are all here today? Emma nodded, her dark curls bouncing. "That man," she said, pointing at Richard, "says he is my papa, but he is not. Papa Sam is my papa." "I see," Judge Harrison said. "Can you tell me about your Papa Sam?" Emma's face lit up. "He is the best papa in the whole world," she said enthusiastically. "He takes me riding on Daisy, that is my horse, and he tells me stories about brave cowgirls. He helps me with my letters and my numbers, and he makes Mama happy. Sometimes Mama cries happy tears now instead of sad tears like she used to, and it is because of Papa Sam." "And what about that man over there?" Judge Harrison asked, gesturing to Richard. "Do you know him?" Emma looked at Richard with the frank assessment of a child. "No," she said simply. "He is a stranger. I do not want to go with strangers. Papa Sam says I should never go with strangers, even if they say they know Mama." Richard's face had gone red with suppressed fury, but he said nothing. Judge Harrison stood and returned to his bench, looking thoughtful. "I will need some time to consider all the testimony and evidence," he said. "Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning, at which time I will deliver my ruling." That night was the longest of Zelda's life. She, Samuel, and Emma huddled together in their bed, none of them able to sleep. Emma finally drifted off near dawn, but Zelda and Samuel lay awake, holding each other and praying that the judge would see the truth. The next morning, the courtroom was packed again as Judge Harrison took his seat. His expression was grave as he surveyed the assembled crowd. "I have given this matter a great deal of thought," he began. "The law is clear about parental rights, and under normal circumstances, a biological father has a claim to his child. However, these are not normal circumstances." Zelda's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Samuel's hand gripped hers tightly. "Mr. Foster may be Emma's biological father," Judge Harrison continued, "but he abandoned his responsibilities to that child before she was even born. He made threats against the child's mother, attempted to coerce her into giving up the baby, and showed no interest in his daughter's welfare for over 3 years. His current claim to want custody appears to be motivated by pride and a desire for control rather than genuine concern for the child's best interests." Richard's lawyers started to protest, but Judge Harrison held up a hand for silence. "Furthermore," he said, "the testimony of this community makes it clear that Emma Foster Lawson has a loving, stable home with her mother and stepfather. Samuel Lawson has acted as this child's father in every meaningful way, and it is evident from Emma's own testimony that she sees him as her parent, not Mr. Foster. To remove her from the only home she has ever known, from the parents who have loved and raised her, would be cruel and detrimental to her welfare." Hope was beginning to bloom in Zelda's chest, but she was afraid to believe it was real. "Therefore," Judge Harrison said, his voice firm and final, "I am ruling in favor of the Lawsons. Mr. Foster's claim for custody is denied. Samuel Lawson will be granted full legal adoption of Emma Foster Lawson, giving him all the rights and responsibilities of a biological parent. Mr. Foster is ordered to stay away from the Lawson family and to have no further contact with Emma unless she, upon reaching adulthood, chooses to seek him out." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Zelda burst into tears, and Samuel pulled both her and Emma into his arms, holding them tightly as relief and joy washed over them. Emma, not fully understanding what had happened but sensing the happiness around her, giggled and hugged them both. Richard Foster stood abruptly, his face a mask of fury. For a moment, Zelda thought he might do something violent, but his lawyers quickly hustled him out of the courtroom before he could cause a scene. As the crowd surrounded them with congratulations and well wishes, Samuel lifted Emma onto his shoulders and took Zelda's hand. "It is over," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are a family, legally and officially. No one can take that away from us now." "Thank you," Zelda whispered, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Thank you for fighting for us, for loving us, for being exactly who you are." "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done," Samuel replied. The years that followed were everything Zelda had dreamed of and more. The general store continued to thrive under their management, becoming a cornerstone of the Salina community. They expanded the business, adding a small warehouse and hiring additional help as the town grew. Emma grew into a bright, confident young woman, never doubting for a moment that she was loved and wanted. Samuel legally adopted her shortly after the trial, and she proudly carried the Lawson name. She excelled in school, showing a particular aptitude for mathematics and literature, and Samuel encouraged her ambitions with the same devotion he showed to everything involving his daughter. 2 years after the trial, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. Samuel's joy was boundless, and he fussed over her constantly, much to her amused exasperation. Emma was equally excited about becoming a big sister, already making plans for teaching the baby everything she knew. Their son, James, was born on a snowy December morning in 1881. He came into the world wailing with indignation, his face red and his tiny fists waving, and Samuel wept openly as he held him for the first time. "He has got your nose," Zelda said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "Poor child," Samuel joked, then grew serious as he looked down at his son. "Hello, James Samuel Lawson. Welcome to the family. Your mama and your big sister Emma and I are very glad you are here." Emma, allowed into the room to meet her brother, approached carefully and looked down at the baby with wide eyes. "He is very small," she observed. "You were even smaller once," Zelda told her, "but you grew and so will he. And you are going to help teach him everything just like you planned." As Emma gently touched her brother's tiny hand and he wrapped his fingers around hers, Zelda looked at Samuel and saw her own contentment reflected in his eyes. This was their family, hard-won and deeply cherished, and she thanked God every day for the cowboy who had walked into her store that hot August day and changed her life forever. The years continued to pass, marked by the small joys and challenges of everyday life. James grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who idolized his father and adored his older sister. Emma helped raise him with the fierce protectiveness of a big sister, teaching him to read and helping him with his schoolwork the same way Samuel had once helped her. In 1884, their second son was born, a quiet, thoughtful baby they named William after Samuel's father. The family above the general store was getting crowded, so Samuel and Zelda made the decision to build a proper house on the edge of town, a spacious home with room for their growing family and a big front porch where they could sit together in the evenings. Emma was 11 when she finally asked about her biological father. It was a quiet evening, and she had been helping Zelda with the mending while Samuel put the boys to bed. She asked her question in the same casual tone she might use to ask about the weather, but Zelda felt the weight of it immediately. "Mama, what was he like?" Emma asked. "My real father, I mean, the one who came here that time." Zelda set down her needle carefully, considering her answer. She and Samuel had always been honest with Emma about her origins, never hiding the truth but never dwelling on it either. "He was a complicated man," Zelda said finally. "He was handsome and charming, and when I was young and foolish, I thought I loved him. But he was not a good man, Emma. He was selfish and cruel, and when things became difficult, he ran away from his responsibilities." "Do you think he ever thinks about me?" Emma asked, her young face serious. Zelda pulled her daughter close. "I do not know," she said honestly. But I do know that Samuel is your real father in every way that matters. Blood does not make a family, Emma. Love does. And Samuel has loved you from the moment he met you." Emma nodded against her mother's shoulder. "I know," she said. "I just wondered sometimes, that is all. But I am glad it worked out the way it did. I cannot imagine anyone else being my papa except Papa Sam." "Neither can I," Zelda agreed, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. When Samuel came downstairs and found them holding each other, he joined the embrace without asking what had prompted it. They stayed that way for a long moment, a family bound by choice and love rather than obligation. Emma grew into a remarkable young woman. When she turned 18 in 1893, she announced her intention to attend the newly established Teachers' College in Topeka. Samuel was bursting with pride, though the thought of his daughter leaving home made his heart ache. "You have taught me that women can do anything they set their minds to," Emma told him on the evening before she left for college. "You and Mama both showed me that with hard work and determination, you can build a good life. I want to be a teacher, Papa. I want to help other children learn and grow the way you helped me." Samuel hugged her tightly. "You are going to be an amazing teacher," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And no matter how far you go or what you do, you will always be my little girl." "I know, Papa," Emma said, hugging him back just as fiercely. "And you will always be my hero." With Emma away at college, the house felt emptier, but James and William kept their parents busy. James, now 12, was already showing an aptitude for business, helping out at the store and demonstrating a natural talent for negotiation and customer relations. William, at 9, was quieter and more introspective, content to spend hours reading or working on elaborate drawings of buildings and bridges. "We raised good children," Zelda said one evening as she and Samuel sat on their front porch, watching the sun set over the Kansas prairie. "We did," Samuel agreed, his arm around her shoulders, "though I think the credit goes more to you than to me." "That is nonsense," Zelda protested. "You have been a wonderful father, Samuel, better than I ever dreamed Emma would have, better than I thought any man could be." Samuel kissed her temple. "I had good motivation," he said. "From the moment I saw you standing in that store, covered in flour dust and trying to look fierce while your little girl hid behind your skirts, I knew you were special. You were this fierce, protective lioness, and I wanted nothing more than to be worthy of you." "You have been more than worthy," Zelda assured him. "You have been everything." As they sat together in the gathering twilight, Zelda reflected on how far they had come from that hot, August day 15 years ago. The frightened woman on the run with a small child had become a successful businesswoman and beloved member of the community. The drifting cowboy with a broken heart had become a devoted husband and father, respected throughout the county. Together, they had built something real and lasting, something that would continue through their children and their children's children. Emma graduated from Teachers' College in 1897 and returned to Salina to teach at the local school. She brought with her a young man named Daniel Pierce, a fellow teacher she had met in Topeka. Samuel was initially suspicious, as any father would be, but Daniel's respectful manner and obvious devotion to Emma won him over. They were married the following spring in a beautiful ceremony at the church, and Samuel walked his daughter down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. "You take care of her," Samuel told Daniel quietly before handing Emma over. "She is the most precious thing in the world to me." "I know, sir," Daniel said seriously, "and I promise you I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of her." Emma kissed her father's cheek. "I love you, Papa," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." James took over management of the general store when he turned 18, showing a business acumen that impressed even his parents. Under his leadership, the store expanded again, adding a lumber yard and a feed supply business. William, meanwhile, went off to study engineering at the University of Kansas, his quiet determination carrying him toward his dreams of building bridges and roads. By the turn of the century, Samuel and Zelda had become the patriarch and matriarch of a large, thriving family. Emma and Daniel had given them 3 grandchildren, bright-eyed youngsters who loved visiting their grandparents' house and hearing stories about the old days. James married a sweet girl named Lucy and began building his own family, while William sent letters from school full of enthusiasm for his studies and plans for the future. On a warm evening in June 1901, Samuel and Zelda celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren had gathered at the house for a party, and as the evening drew to a close and the little ones were put to bed, the couple found themselves once again on their front porch, looking out at the land they had made their home. "You ever regret it?" Zelda asked softly. "Stopping in Salina that day, getting tangled up with a woman with a complicated past and a child." Samuel turned to look at her, his eyes still as warm and loving as they had been that first day. "Not for one single second," he said firmly. "You and Emma, you were not complications or burdens. You were the answer to prayers I did not even know I was praying. When Emma was little and she told you about me that first time, do you remember what I said?" Zelda smiled, recalling that moment so many years ago. "You said you had 2 reasons to stay." "I did," Samuel confirmed, "and I meant it. You were both reasons to stay, to put down roots, to build a life. You gave me purpose and love and a family when I thought those things were lost to me forever. Every day with you has been a gift, Zelda. Every single day." Tears slipped down Zelda's cheeks as she leaned into her husband's embrace. "I love you," she whispered. "I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Samuel replied, tilting her face up to kiss her tenderly. "My brave, beautiful wife, my Zelda." From inside the house, they could hear their family laughing and talking, the sound of their grandchildren's voices mixing with their children's deeper tones. It was the sound of life, of continuity, of love passed down through generations. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Samuel and Zelda sat together in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, their hearts full. They had fought for their family, protected each other through danger and uncertainty, and built something beautiful and lasting. The scared young woman and the drifting cowboy who had met by chance in a general store in Salina, Kansas, had found in each other everything they had been searching for. And as they grew older together, watching their children thrive and their grandchildren grow, they never forgot the moment that had changed everything. The moment when Zelda had warned Samuel about her past, expecting him to walk away, and instead he had given her the words that became the foundation of their family. "Then, I have 2 reasons to stay." Those words, spoken in faith and hope and love, had transformed their lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. They had proven that family was not defined by blood or by perfection, but by choice and commitment and the willingness to fight for the people you loved. Samuel and Zelda Lawson lived long, happy lives surrounded by their family. When they finally passed, within months of each other in the winter of 1919, they were mourned by the entire community of Salina and remembered as examples of what true love and devotion looked like. Their children and grandchildren carried on their legacy, passing down the story of how a cowboy and a woman with a child from before found each other and built a family that withstood every challenge. The general store that had been the foundation of their life together remained in the Lawson family for 3 more generations. a testament to the hard work and partnership that Samuel and Zelda had exemplified. And in the family Bible that was passed down through the years, someone had written in careful script on the first page a simple inscription that captured the essence of their love story. "Then I have 2 reasons to stay, and stay he did, forever and always." Samuel and Zelda Lawson, married January 1879, together for all eternity. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, tested by adversity and proven stronger than any challenge. It was a reminder that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, and that true love is not about perfection or ease, but about standing together through whatever storms may come. And in the end, that was what Samuel and Zelda had done. They had stood together, loved fiercely, protected each other and their children, and built something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone. Their legacy was not measured in wealth or status, but in the lives they had touched and the family they had created. It was a legacy of love, and it endured.